And now we move on to the SLITS-CUT. Run the numbers for us, Matt.
All right. So the SLITS-CUT comes in at number 317 in the 1970s on Best Ever Albums, number 28 in 1979, number 1,559 of all time. It is the Slits' highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, and it did make Rolling Stone's list, coming in at number 260.
All right.
Is it my
Josh,
turn?
Josh.
It's you, Josh.
Yes, this album is pretty good. I really enjoyed it. I think it's my album of the week, if I had to do that jingle. Josh's album of the week. And yeah, this is like a seminal woman female punk band, and they also seem kind of krautrock inspired in a lot of ways that some of these punk rock bands have been. They have an energy and power to them that I really appreciate. They seem like they are intentionally trying to do something different with the punk rock sound and feel. There is almost a metronomic beat at times on their songs that I really respond to. I also feel like they have some ska elements in there that they throw in that I responded to, like on Spend, Spend, Spend. And the drums are really great on this, and I appreciate that they all, or at least I think they have multiple singers as well. I really responded to that. This is a band that I knew about, and probably their cover of the Heard It Through the Grapevine, which is on the album as like a bonus track, I think, and that is really great. I've heard that before, and I couldn't remember what movie it was from. I have to dig a little deeper, but that's a great track on this that's kind of extra. And they also just kind of bring that punk rock spirit to love and relationships, like on Ping Pong Affair and Love and Romance, Love und Romance. And they really have some great lyrics too, like on Shoplifting, when they're, oh god, what was in the chorus? They just said that they're gonna take and they don't have to pay for fuck all or something like that. I thought that was hilarious. So I really appreciate their vibe and energy, and this is an album I want to re-listen to again. I did only listen to it once this time, but I liked it.
This boy, here's how I describe the Slits. If Bjork made a like punk outfit, like all I could think of is I was like, this sounds like Bjork at times, like the offbeat found sounds. This was a challenge. I'm gonna fully admit that. Unlike the Raincoats that were moored a little bit in, they had the same amateurish vibe, right? Like as if we picked it up and just kind of rode energy, which is a cool element of punk. This was raw. It came first, but it was rawer than the Raincoats album. There were parts on the Raincoats album where stuff can, as we mentioned before, it sounded at times like somebody picked up a violin on the Raincoats album, but didn't quite know how to play it, but was trying a little bit. There were times with this where it was like, let's see what this sounds like. So it had a little bit of that experimental vibe. I appreciate, they're a band called the Slits, right? They're naked on the cover. I mean, there's a clear vibe, right? Like that they are trying to get across. There's a feminism that is in your face, which is cool. I like that, and I especially like it when they're foraging the ground. As a piece of music, I think I appreciated it more for the aesthetics of the group, like what they sort of. I felt like what the Runaways were play acting doing, like this group was the real deal, right? In terms of as a group, right? This was sort of like if you took the Runaways and said, how about let's make them an authentic deal without real rules? I felt like that's what this was. After a while, the lack of hooks and stuff did wear on me a little bit. I unlike the Raincoats album when I listened to it the second time, I didn't pick up a lot more, right, that I leached onto sonically. So from that end of things, I can only put it in the middle, because as a piece of music, I do need something to move my emotions one way or the other. It definitely challenged me, but it didn't challenge me in the I want to dig into it more. It challenged me more sonic structure wise, and that's not a bad thing, but I don't know if I wanted to keep digging into it, if that makes sense. And I do think that this is an album that absolutely in its time would resonate, and even now could still resonate. But it's weird when you know you're not the absolute audience that would resonate with it most. You're always kind of at a distance, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And because it was so discordant, and because it was, like you said, at times had elements of the krautrock sound, like divorced from traditional hooks and melody. I think, I'm not going to say it was a melodyless album, but there wasn't a lot to jump into. I think because of that, I observed it from afar more than I really was able to connect into it. So I would only say in the middle for me.
So I kind of had one of those moments where this album I think I've known of for many, many years because of the cover. But not in the way that you might think, because I think it's definitely a record that makes a lot of best of lists and stuff that kind of comes up in, whether it's an article you're reading in a magazine or online or something like that. So but the name, I never associated or knew what the name of the album was or the name of the band really. It was just kind of like, oh, there's this album that has this like interesting cover of like three like native women, and then like I noticed further onto it, I was like, oh, they're naked and covered in mud. I was like, okay, so I never really picked up on it because it's always been from afar. Yeah. And then I was like, this is the Slits. I'm like, how do I just see the cover of an album for so many years and never think to like look stuff up or just whatever? It's just like okay, it's just there. So I was
that's
just
what like, this podcast is to some degree, isn't it? Like
it is. Yeah. It's just like, so I just like look at it, I'm like, and I'm just like, how did I never think to even, who is this artist, right? So I didn't even know initially. I was like, oh, it's a guy group, I assumed. And it's not, right, of course. And I'm like, oh, the girls on the album, they're probably people in the band. Of course they are. So this was just a really, so when I first listened to this, I was like, wow, it's just overcome with all this, like, feelings of stupidity on my end, because I'm like, how am I just doing this now? But anyway, yeah, having said all that, so this, I had a similar reaction to this that I did with the Raincoats, mainly because of the sonic nature of it. Josh, it's interesting that you like this one so much, but we're finding a more challenging to listen to to get into the Raincoats album, because the Raincoats album's probably, I think, an easier listen to than this. Although,
see, I feel I had the opposite reaction. I felt
like
wow, okay,
yeah. I mean, I think this. I don't know which one I like better. I'm kind of mixed on this too. This one to me is a little bit more interesting. I think that stuff that you're talking about, John, the lack of the hooks and stuff, is certainly true, because there's definitely not a whole lot of that or much at all. But then there's a song like Newtown. That song stands out to me. That absolutely sounds like a Can song, and there's a part of that song that I just feel like that I get so into, that I'm just connected to, and I think it's really, really cool. But it's totally not a traditional song structure, right? It's more, a lot of this is more beats. The drumming is very interesting. The next song, Ping Pong Affair's got some really cool drumming going on. And so I'm kind of interested in this record because it defies kind of a lot of the things that I like about music traditionally, but I still find certain elements of it really kind of cool. And then there's certain aspects of, like, there's parts of Typical Girls that I like, and then there's parts of it that I don't like as much, some kind of, so I kind of, even within certain songs, I go up and down on. So I did listen to this several times. I don't know if I got terribly too much more info the more I listened to it. but I guess it was a little bit easier on subsequent listens because I kind of had an idea of what to expect this time around. I loved. I didn't realize that I heard it through the grapevine, and what is it? Lieb and Romance, the last song, were bonus tracks. I didn't look that up, so I just listened to them normally. I thought that version of I heard it through the grapevine was really kind of cool. And I finally picked up some of the lyrics of that song that I never knew before, that like, heard it through the grapevine, how much longer will you be my baby? Like that part. I'm like, oh, that's what they say? Because it always just the lyrics. I'm not the lyrics guy, right? Like you got to spell it out for me. So, because I'm an idiot.
Takes these punk rock covers.
Yeah. That's make everything a punk rock cover.
Yeah, exactly. So, but this seemed to me very much ahead of its time. I did a little bit of research that I think one of the main people in the Raincoats was inspired to create her band because she saw a Slits concert and saw these girls up there and was like, well, if they're doing that, like this is going to give us free reign to kind of do our own female thing. And then they join and then she does her band, and then the drummer from the Slits joins Raincoats, so there's definitely some overlap there. But you can, John, the Bjork comparison I didn't think of before. I totally see that. I think you're absolutely
for sure.
right.
The first thing I thought is like this lead singer is Bjork in another era.
Yeah, and that's something that I thought of because I was listening to this and the Raincoats too, to a lesser extent, but still. And I'm going, I know this sounds like so much. There's who are the acts that this sounds like? And I was really struggling trying to pinpoint like this is like for some reason Bjork. I didn't come up with, but there's other
like
bands
Sonic
too.
Youth and bands like that.
Yeah,
sure. There's elements of that. Now Sonic Youth tightens it up at times and isn't quite that. Well, early Sonic Youth kind of is that avant-garde, but I got Sonic Youth vibes too. But
I could see that, and there's a lot of I found a lot of similarities between this and the Raincoats, even though they kind of had their own little differences and styles. Similar. But this is again, it's more of a basic, stripped down, primitive type musical sound. But the drumming, it was really very interesting, and like I said, definitely the standout track on here was Newtown. I thought that was a fantastic song. So I'm gonna go thumbs in the middle, maybe slightly thumbs up. Maybe I like this a little bit more than the Raincoats album, but they're kind of right around the same lane, and it's totally influential. I can absolutely see why this is on people's best list because this is different, man. Especially
drum dominated too. I'd like to point out this is another album just like the Raincoats one that the drums are like popped off the page again. So different way, but yeah.
I think the drums, I think the beat is another aspect of music. I think I first go to melody, like if it's got a catchy hook or melody, like that's one of the things I first go to in music, followed then by the beats, because if you got a really cool drum beat going on, like if you don't have a hook, that can be saved by really interesting percussion. So, and I think that's what you get here.
Did we mention there's like reggae sounds on this too?
Yes.
That are more prominent.
Yes.
Yeah. That's another thing that like not, all the time, and certainly not a huge hallmark of it, but there were times where you started thinking, ooh, they're delving into like a reggae, but they never stay in one area too long, which is sort of what makes it avant-garde. But yeah,
it's all the ups, it's all the offbeats. It's strumming up on the offbeats, and that Josh, I think you might have said ska. It's maybe ska elements or slash, which is again all the offbeats as well. So yeah, I heard that as well.
I'm another band that kind of comes to mind when I think about Raincoats and the Slits is Sushi and the Banshees, which I'm surprised didn't really cover.
I don't know them.
We will be covering them.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, because
they're a little later.
Yeah, I really like them, and they're kind of similar, but not the same as them. Probably more conventional in some aspects, but
Susie and the Banshees has way more melody and
yeah.
They have experimental elements. You're right. We'll talk about them plenty. Is it Juju? I think is their big album, and that's early '80s.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. I think we do it then. Yeah, so they're coming. Don't worry. Adam and the Ants is another group that I don't know if we cover, but that's another group that there's elements. More so the Raincoats than this, but elements of that as well. So that's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all said this, but I think both of these, Slits and the Raincoats, are kind of important bands in the history of music, especially punk rock and for Riot Girl and women's punk rock and feminist rock and all that.
They're big in the sense, they're big for female rock music, you know, because the original tale of the Big Axe was the male groups. And it probably should have, because they sold better, right? And we can't ignore that. Both these bands kind of were way underground, but they had a little bit of that Velvet Underground deal where the people who bought their albums were disproportionately people that became consequential in music later. So I think that's what their legacy is. Because, yeah. So, yeah, interesting stuff. I'm glad we listened to it again.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't help but think when I heard the name The Slits, I was like, well, that explained. Because I always wondered where like Courtney Love got the band name Hole from, and I'm like, I would not be shocked if that was not. Because you think about it, it's like I'm like, yeah, I think that can't be coincidental. So, just with how much they covered both those bands. So.
Yeah.